The growl came from somewhere deep inside Juno's chest, low and terrible, a sound Harriet Colson had never heard in 11 long years at her side. The bus doors sat wide open. The driver shouted something impatient. Harriet's cane trembled in her free hand as the golden retriever pressed a heavy shoulder against her knee and pushed her hard back onto the sidewalk of Elm Street. And then, in the ordinary morning light of Bristol, Vermont, everything Harriet thought she knew about that Tuesday began to unravel. Before we go on, tell us in the comments what part of the world you're listening from, and go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss stories like this one. Harriet stood very still. She was 62 years old, a retired music teacher in a wool coat the color of storm clouds, and Juno had been her eyes since the summer she had lost the last of her sight to a slow, cruel disease that took years to finish the job. Juno had never once refused a curb. Juno had never once refused a doorway. Juno had never once, in all those thousands of gentle mornings, planted her paws on the concrete and refused to move. And yet here they were, the two of them, and the dog was growling like something ancient had woken up under her fur. The driver of the 722 bus was a young man named Wesley Pratt, 24 years old, thin as a rake, with a tired baseball cap pulled low. He leaned out of the folding doors and tapped his wristwatch, though of course Harriet could not see it. He said, "Ma'am, I'm on a schedule. Are you getting on or not?" His voice was not cruel. It was only tired, the tired of a man who had been driving that same loop since before dawn. Harriet felt the heat rise up her neck and into her cheeks. She apologized softly. She tugged the harness. Juno did not move. The dog barked once, sharp and protective, and then she growled again, and the whole bus fell quiet the way a room falls quiet when someone shatters a glass. Behind Harriet, a woman had stopped walking. Her name was Marion Delacroix, and she was a nurse on her way to Porter Medical Center, still wearing her white sneakers and the navy scrubs under her long coat. Marion had been about to cross the street. She had noticed Harriet only because the dog was making that sound, and something about the sound turned her cold. Marion looked past Harriet, up through the open doors, past Wesley Pratt in his baseball cap, and her eyes went to the very back row of the bus. What she saw there took the breath out of her lungs. An old man was slumped against the fogged window. His arm hung down into the aisle, his head lolled at a wrong angle. Under the yellow bus light, his skin was the color of wet ash. Marion did not think. She had been a nurse for 21 years, and her body moved before her brain did. She stepped past Harriet, muttering, "Excuse me, ma'am, excuse me, sir," and she went up the 3 metal steps 2 at a time. Wesley Pratt turned in his seat, confused, and started to say, "Hey, lady," but Marion was already at the back. She pressed 2 fingers against the old man's throat. There was a pulse, barely, a thin, unsteady flutter that could stop at any second. She said his name because he was wearing a hospital bracelet from a checkup he had gone to the week before, and someone had written his name in ballpoint on the plastic. "Elmer. Elmer, honey, can you hear me?" She tilted his head back. Air was not moving. She hit her radio button, then remembered she was not on shift. Then she screamed for Wesley to call 911. "Now," she said. "Right now." And she lowered the old man to the sticky rubber floor of the aisle, put the heel of her hand on his sternum, and began chest compressions with the steady, brutal rhythm of a metronome. 1, 2, 3, 4. She counted out loud because she had been trained to. Her jaw was clenched. Outside on the sidewalk, Harriet Colson was still standing frozen. She could hear the shouting, the pounding, the sound of Marion counting. She could hear Wesley Pratt on his phone stammering an address. She could hear the wet rasp of Juno's breathing, and she could feel the dog's warm flank against her leg, and she understood very slowly that Juno had known. Juno had known. Somehow the dog had known, and had refused to let her step into that bus, because if Harriet had climbed those 3 metal steps in her usual quiet way and settled into her usual seat, no one on the sidewalk would have looked up. No one would have noticed the grey man in the back row, and by the time the bus reached the community centre 32 minutes later, Elmer Hastings would have been dead in his seat. Sirens came from somewhere down Main Street. Marion did not stop compressions. Her arms were shaking. Wesley Pratt stood in the aisle now with his baseball cap in his hands. 2 paramedics ran up the steps with a red bag. They took over. They put pads on Elmer's chest. They shocked him once. His body jumped. They shocked him again. Marion sat back on her heels and wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist, and she said, "Come on, come on, come on." And on the third shock, Elmer Hastings, 68 years old, grandfather of 2, retired mechanic from Middlebury, took a shuddering, ragged breath, and the paramedic on his left said, "Got him, we got him, let's move." They carried him out on a stretcher. Harriet could hear the metal legs of it clanging as they lowered them onto the sidewalk. She reached out with one hand, uncertain, and Marion, coming down the steps, caught her fingers and squeezed them. Marion's hand was warm and shaking. Marion said, "Ma'am, your dog just saved that man's life. Do you know that? Your dog." Harriet's throat closed up. She knelt right there on the cold pavement, ignoring the puddles soaking through her stockings, and she pressed her forehead into the warm fur of Juno's neck. She whispered, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," over and over. And the dog, still trembling with whatever old sense had woken in her, licked the tears off her cheek. She thought later that this was the miracle, that this was the story, that she would go home and tell it to her sister on the phone and cry a little, and then life would go back to normal. But the story had barely started. The story would not stop for weeks, because on that same morning, while Harriet was still kneeling on the pavement, a young paramedic named Toby went through Elmer Hastings's coat pockets looking for identification. He found the hospital bracelet. He found a folded $5 bill. And he found a letter, folded 4 times into a small, tight square, addressed in shaking blue ink to a woman named Harriet Colson. Toby did not know who Harriet Colson was. He put the letter in the plastic bag with the rest of Elmer's belongings and rode with him to the hospital. And that letter, which no one on that sidewalk yet knew existed, would tear open a wound that had been sealed for 41 years. Harriet went home that morning. She did not play piano at the community center. She sat in her small blue house near the town green and put a bowl of water on the floor and put a hand on Juno's head and did not move for a long time. The kettle whistled at some point. She did not answer it. The phone rang. She did not answer it. Juno leaned her whole weight against Harriet's shins and dozed, breathing in the slow, deep rhythm of a dog who has done a hard, hard thing and knows it. But something began to nag at Harriet by the end of that afternoon. Something about the way Juno had growled. It had not sounded like Juno at all. It had sounded, if you could believe such a thing about a dog, like a warning that came from further away than one bus door. Juno had smelled danger, yes. Marion had said so. A body in crisis has a scent, apparently, sour and metallic, and a dog can smell it a full minute before a human would ever suspect a thing. But there had been something else in that bark, something that had sounded to Harriet almost like recognition. She did not know what to do with that thought. She put it away. 3 days later, Marion Delacroix called. Elmer was awake. Elmer was talking. Elmer was asking in a hoarse, raspy voice to speak to the woman with the golden dog. Marion said the family had asked her to relay the message. Would Harriet come to the hospital? Harriet took a long breath. She put on her wool coat. She clipped Juno's harness on, and she walked, one careful step at a time, 3 blocks to the bus stop on Elm Street. And this time, when the doors hissed open, Juno padded up the 3 steps without hesitating. The bus was not driven by Wesley Pratt this time. The driver was a woman with a laugh like a bell. Harriet sat in the front. She did not sit in the back. She would never sit in the back of a bus again for as long as she lived. At Porter Medical Center, a young volunteer walked her to Elma's room. The hallway smelled of alcohol wipes and yesterday's chicken. Harriet's heart was beating too fast. She did not know why. She had never met this man. She had no reason at all to feel this ringing, thick fear rising in her chest. The door opened. There was the beep of a monitor. There was the smell of a man who had not been fully clean in a week. There was breathing. And then a voice, wet and cracked and old, said, "Harry? Oh, Harry. You came." Harriet stopped walking. The volunteer at her elbow said, "Ma'am, are you all right?" Harriet did not answer, because no one in this world had called her Harry in over 40 years. No one alive, she had thought, still knew that name. Elmer Hastings tried to sit up. He could not. He said, "Forgive me. Please forgive me." And then he began to cry, in the quiet, exhausted way that old men cry when they have carried a stone for a very long time. Harriet reached out with a trembling hand and found the edge of the hospital bed. She lowered herself into the chair beside it. Juno lay down at her feet with a soft grunt, and Elmer, in a voice broken by tubes and by decades, began to tell her a story she had never known she was inside of. He said, "Do you remember the little band in the summer of 1983, the one that played at the county fair? You played piano, and there was a boy on the bass, skinny kid, real quiet, real dumb about you." Harriet's mouth went dry. She said, "Elmer. Elmer Hastings. Oh my God, Elmer." He said, "That was me, Harry, that was me. And I've been a coward for 41 years. He told her slowly, with long pauses to catch his breath, that he had loved her the whole summer of that fair, that he had never had the courage to tell her, that in the fall she had gone off to teach music at the elementary school, and he had gone off to fix cars in Middlebury, and he had gotten married to a good woman named Corinne, who had died 6 years ago, and he had raised a daughter named Sadie, who was in the waiting room right now. And every year on the 4th of July, when the town band played on the green, he had thought of Harriet, and every year he had picked up his phone and put it down again, because he did not know what a man in his 60s says to a woman he loved when he was 21. But 6 months ago, Elmer said, his doctor had told him about the heart and about the ticking clock, and Elmer had realized that if he did not say it now, he never would. So he had written her a letter. He had written it 7 times. He had thrown 6 versions away. And on the Tuesday morning that his heart finally gave out, he had been on the 7:22 bus to Bristol, riding it to the community centre so that he could ask the janitor where the retired music teacher lived, so that he could walk up her porch and knock on her door and hand her the letter and go home. Harriet's hand was pressed against her mouth. Juno had lifted her head from the floor and was watching, very quietly. "The letter," Elmer said. "Sadie has it. She was going to bring it. Harry, will you let her bring it? Will you read it?" Harriet nodded. She could not speak. Later that evening in the hallway, a slim woman in her 30s with tired, kind eyes stopped Harriet at the elevator. She said, "My name is Sadie Hastings, and I have this." She pressed a small envelope into Harriet's hand. She said, "I do not know what is in it. My father says it is for you." Harriet said, "Will you read it to me when we get to my house, please? My eyes are not what they were." Sadie said, "Yes, of course." They rode the bus back to Elm Street together. They did not speak. Juno rode between them, calm now, gentle. At the small blue house near the town green, Harriet put the kettle on. She sat down in her worn armchair. Sadie sat on the sofa across from her, and she opened the envelope, and by the light of the reading lamp, she read the letter aloud, in a voice that trembled a little on every 3rd word. The letter was not long. It said, "Harry, I have loved you since the fair. I never told you. I do not know if you remember me. I am dying, and I do not want to go without telling you." You made a summer beautiful in a way I never earned. If you want nothing to do with me, I understand, but I wanted once in my life to be brave. Yours, Elmer. Sadie's voice broke on the last word. She folded the letter. She put it on the coffee table. Then she said something that Harriet had not expected. Sadie said, "Miss Coulson, I have to tell you something else. Something I do not know if my father remembers or if he ever knew, and it changes everything." Harriet's spine straightened. She said, "What is it, dear?" Sadie was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "My father was not the only one in the little band that summer. Do you remember the drummer, the tall boy from Rutland?" Harriet frowned. She said, "Yes, I remember him. He was called Bud." Sadie said, "Bud was my uncle. He was my mother's brother, and in 1988, 5 years after that summer, Bud was driving home from a wedding in Burlington. He had been drinking. He hit a woman on a country road outside Bristol. He did not stop. It was raining. He said later he thought he had hit a deer. The woman was found the next morning. She was alive, but she had been thrown, and her head had struck a rock, and she was never going to see again." Harriet went very still in the armchair. Juno lifted her head. Sadie said, "That woman was you, was it not?" Harriet's hands closed on the arms of the chair. Sadie said, "My father knew. My father knew because my mother told him. My mother knew because Bud confessed to her on his deathbed in 94. My father has carried this for 30 years, Miss Coulson. He has known that the drunk who took your sight was the brother-in-law he once played music with. He has known that he grew up in the same family as the man who broke your life. And I think that is why he never came to your door, not the whole story, but part of it." Harriet did not speak. Somewhere in her chest, a wall she had built 41 years ago began very slowly to shake. Sadie was crying now, silently, with her hands folded in her lap. She said, "I did not know if I should tell you. My father did not send me here to tell you, but I could not sit across from you in my father's hospital room and hold this secret between us. It is not my secret to hold." For a long, long time, the only sound in the small blue house was the ticking of the kitchen clock and the slow breathing of the golden dog on the rug. Then Harriet very quietly said, "Thank you for telling me, Sadie. Thank you for that." Sadie stayed until the kettle boiled dry. Then she left. She said, "My father will not push you. Whatever you decide, he just wanted, once in his life, to be honest with you." That night, Harriet did not sleep. She lay in her bed with Juno stretched along the side of it, one warm paw against her thigh, and she stared into a darkness that had been her whole world for 4 decades. She thought about the country road outside Bristol. She thought about the wet grass and the smell of rain and the sudden bright light of the car she had never seen and the crack that had ended her sight. She thought about the years of learning to walk again, of learning to cook, of learning to trust a harness and a leash and a warm animal at her side. She thought about the man in the hospital bed who had loved her one summer and had said nothing and had spent decades knowing what she had suffered because of someone in his own family, and had still, on the last morning of what might have been his life, gotten on a bus with a shaking blue letter in his coat pocket. She thought and did not sleep, and by dawn she had made no decision. But she was already dressed when the phone rang. The phone was Marion Delacroix. Marion said, "Harriet, honey, are you sitting down? There has been a small problem. I do not want you to panic, but somebody is looking for your dog." Harriet said, "What?" Marion said, "A reporter from the Herald wrote a piece about what happened on the bus. The bus company sent us a copy." "It is a nice piece, Harriet, it really is. But somebody read it in the bar newspaper this morning, a woman named Dolores Van, and she is telling the paper that your dog belongs to her, that your dog was stolen from her farm 5 years ago. She is coming to Bristol tomorrow. She is bringing a lawyer." Harriet felt her breath leave her body. She said, "That is impossible. I got Juno from the guide dog school in New Hampshire. She was trained there. There are records." Marion said, "I know, honey, I know, but she is coming, and you need to be ready. And Harriet, I do not want to say it, but the woman sounds sure. She says she has photographs." Harriet put the phone down. Her hand was cold. For the second time in 1 week, she felt the ground shift under her feet. That evening, Wesley Pratt, the young bus driver, knocked at her door. She had not expected him. He said, "Ma'am, I don't know if you remember me. I'm the one who was rude to you at the stop. On Tuesday. I've been thinking about it every night. I just wanted to come and say I'm sorry, and I wanted to say thank you to the dog, if it's all right." Harriet let him in. Juno padded over and sniffed his hand. Wesley crouched down slowly, awkwardly, and let the dog smell him. He said, "Hey, girl, I owe you one." His voice went thick. He said, "I want you to know something. My grandfather died on my shift 4 years ago. He was a passenger, same route, Route 11. He got on at the college and got off at nothing because he was gone before we got to the next stop, and I did not know. I did not notice. I have driven that route every day since, and I have looked in the rear-view mirror at every old man who ever got on my bus, and I have wondered if he was breathing. And then, Tuesday, I looked away because I was in a hurry, and I almost let it happen again. Mom, I have not slept in 3 days." Harriet put a hand on his shoulder. She said, "Son, you are going to be all right, and so is he." Wesley wiped his face with his sleeve. He said, "Is there anything I can do? Anything at all?" Harriet thought for a moment. Then she said, "Yes. Tomorrow a woman is coming who says my dog is not mine. Will you drive me to the bus company office at noon? I want a witness." Wesley nodded. He said, "Yes, Mom. Yes, I will." The next morning, Harriet dressed carefully. She wore a grey skirt and a soft white blouse. She braided her hair. Juno sat at her feet and watched her with those steady brown eyes. And Harriet said out loud, "No one is taking you from me. Do you hear me? No one." Wesley picked her up at 11:40. The Bristol Bus Company office was 3 miles up the road, a squat brick building with a coffee pot that ran on nothing but stubbornness. In the small conference room at the back, a woman was already sitting. She was in her 50s, sun-browned in a plaid shirt, with a leather portfolio open on the table. Her name was Dolores Van, and she stood up when Harriet came in, and she said, "Ma'am, I am not here to hurt you. But I have to say what I know." Harriet sat down. Juno lay at her feet. Dolores opened the leather portfolio and took out a photograph, and she set it in the middle of the table. She said, "This was taken on my farm in May of 2019. This is my dog. Her name is Sunny. She was 3 months old. She was taken from my yard on the 27th of that month. And I want you all to look at this and tell me that is not the same animal that is lying on the floor right now." The bus company representative, a bald man named Douglas, cleared his throat and looked at the picture. His face did not change. He passed it silently to Wesley. Wesley looked at it. He held it a long time. Then he passed it to Marion, who had come as well, in her scrubs, on her lunch break. Marion looked at it. She said softly, "Mom, may I look at your dog? May I look at her closely?" Dolores said, "Please do." Marion knelt down beside Juno. She lifted the flap of the dog's ear gently and looked inside. Then she looked at the other ear. Then she looked at the photograph again. Then she sat back on her heels. She said, "This is not the same dog, Ma'am." "I am so sorry, but this is not," Dolores said. "What do you mean, it is not the same dog?" Marion said, "The puppy in the photograph has a small white blaze on the inside of her left ear. Right here, you can see it. It is small, but you can see it. Juno does not have that blaze. She has never had that blaze. Ears do not lose markings, Ma'am. I'm so sorry." Dolores went very still. She looked at the photograph. She looked at Juno. She looked at the photograph again. Her lower lip began to tremble. She said, "Oh, "Oh, God! Oh, I am so sorry, I am so sorry. I saw the newspaper, and she looks so much like Sunny. She looks so much like her. And I have looked for Sunny for 5 years, ma'am, 5 years. And I thought. She began to cry. She sat down in the plastic chair, and she put her hands over her face, and she cried like a woman who has been carrying a lost dog inside her chest for 5 long years. Harriet reached across the table and took Dolores's hand. Harriet said, oh, honey, I hope you find her. I hope with all my heart you find her." They sat there, the two of them, for a long time. But something Dolores had said would not leave Harriet's mind that night. Something Dolores had said in her apology. Dolores had said, "My Sunny had a white blaze on her ear, and Juno did not." And that was the proof. But then Dolores had said something else, almost as an afterthought, as she gathered her things to leave. She had said, "Sunny was born on my farm in Randolph. Her mother was a working dog, a search and rescue dog. She had a nose like nothing anyone had ever seen. She could smell a person under 6 feet of snow. She could smell sickness sometimes. Some working dogs can, you know. It runs in bloodlines." That night, Harriet sat in her armchair and stroked Juno's fur and thought about that. It runs in bloodlines. She had never asked in 11 years where Juno had come from. She had gone to the guide dog school, and Juno had been placed with her. Juno had been an adult dog, already trained. Harriet had loved her from the first day and had never asked another question. The next morning she called the guide dog school. She said, "This is Harriet Colson. Juno is my dog. I have had her since 2013. I need to know about her, where she came from, who her parents were." The woman on the other end of the line was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Miss Colson, this is unusual, but because you are asking, and because Juno is one of the finest dogs we ever trained, I will tell you. Juno was a donation. She came to us from a family in Randolph, Vermont in 2012. The family had lost their son overseas. He was a soldier. He had raised her. When he died, his mother sent Juno to us. She said, 'I cannot look at that dog every day. But she saved my boy's life twice over there. Please give her to someone who needs her.'" Harriet's hand tightened on the phone. The woman said, "Do you want the mother's name?" Harriet said, "Yes." "Please," the woman said. "Her name is Peggy Doyle. She still lives in Randolph." That afternoon, Harriet asked Sadie Hastings, who had begun to come by nearly every day now, if she would drive her to Randolph. It was 40 minutes each way. Sadie said, "Of course, Miss Colson, of course I will." Peggy Doyle's house was a small yellow house at the end of a dirt road. There was a swing on the porch. There were wind chimes made of old spoons. Peggy Doyle was 79 years old, and when she opened the door and saw the golden retriever standing beside Harriet, she put her hand over her mouth and did not speak for a full minute. Then she said, come in, both of you. Oh, come in." Peggy made tea. Peggy told the story. Peggy's son had been named Charlie. Charlie had been 23 when he was deployed. He had adopted Juno as a puppy from a shelter in Bar when he came home on leave. He had trained her himself. He had taken her jogging every morning. He had taken her to see his grandmother in the nursing home every Sunday. And when he had been redeployed for the second time, he had left Juno with his mother, and he had promised he would be back. He had been back, Peggy said, 4 months later, in a box. But before that, Peggy said, Charlie had written her long letters from the base, and in one of the letters Charlie had written, "Mama, I brought Juno up here to the training yard yesterday. They let us do that sometimes, and she went right up to Sergeant Petrov and started barking at him, would not stop, and it turned out he had a lump on his neck he had been ignoring for 2 months. The medic looked at it because Juno would not stop. It was cancer, Mama. They flew him home. He's going to make it," Peggy said. "That letter is on my fridge. I have read it 1,000 times," she said. And then, "Miss Colson, When the doorbell rang at my house on a Saturday morning in 2012, and there were two officers in dress uniforms on my porch, I knew. And I could not look at Juno for a week, because she was the only thing in that house that still smelled like Charlie, and I felt like she was waiting for him. Every time a car came up the road, her ears went up, every time. So I sent her to the school, because she was too good a dog to spend her life waiting. Peggy took a photograph off the fridge. She held it out to Sadie. Sadie described it to Harriet. It was Charlie, tall and thin, on a base somewhere sunny, kneeling next to a young golden retriever with soft, floppy ears. On his knee, in his lap, in the grass beside him, everywhere at once. Charlie was laughing. Harriet said, "May I have this picture, please? For a moment, may I hold it?" Peggy pressed it into her hand. Harriet held the paper very gently against her chest. She said, "Oh, Charlie, your girl saved another life. Just this week. Charlie, she saved a man's life on a bus." Peggy began to cry. Peggy said, tell me everything." They sat at the kitchen table with the tea going cold, and Harriet told Peggy the whole story, and when she was done, Peggy said, "That is my Charlie. That is exactly my Charlie. He is still teaching that dog to save people. From wherever he is still teaching her." On the drive back to Bristol, Sadie was very quiet. Then she said, "Miss Coulson, there is something I have been meaning to ask." Harriet said, "Yes, dear." Sadie said, "My father is going home from the hospital tomorrow. He is going to need help, a lot of help. His heart is weak. He should not live alone. My husband and I are 2 hours away, and I cannot move here, and he will not move there. And I know I have no right to ask. But he says the only thing he wants in the world, is to hear you play piano again before he dies, even one song. Would you?" Harriet thought about that country road in 1988. She thought about a boy named Bud in a wet car. She thought about a letter folded 4 times. She thought about a summer at the county fair and a shy young man on a base. She thought about a man in a grey coat on a Tuesday morning bus, riding through the mist with a shaking hand in his pocket. She thought about 41 years of silence. She said yes. Tell him yes. That week, everything changed and did not change. Elmer Hastings came home from the hospital, thin and grey and quiet, and Sadie drove him to a small rental apartment on Maple Street in Bristol, 2 blocks from the town green. Every afternoon at 3, Harriet walked over with Juno at her side and let herself in with the key Sadie had made for her. She would sit at the small, upright piano the local church had lent Elmer, and she would play. She played Chopin. She played Gershwin. She played a piece Elmer had loved in 1983, a slow, sad little waltz called Autumn Sonatina. And every time she played it, the old man on the couch behind her would cry, silently, without shame. They did not talk at first about Bud, about the road, about the rain. It sat between them for a week, and neither of them touched it. But on the 8th day, Elmer said from the couch, "Harry, I need to say something. I have needed to say it for 30 years, and I am not going to be brave twice in one life. So let me be brave now." Harriet lifted her hands from the keys. Elmer said, "I did not know until 1994. When Bud was dying, Corinne told me. She said, 'Elmer, my brother did a terrible thing, and I cannot go with him to the other side carrying it alone.' And she told me, and I asked her, 'Does Harriet know who did it?' And Corinne said, 'No, it was never solved. The road was empty. There were no witnesses. Bud carried it alone until it killed him, and now I am carrying it. And now I am telling you.'" Elmer's voice was very small. He said, "I should have come to your door in 94. I should have come. I should have told you, even if it meant you would hate me, even if it meant you would spit in my face. You deserved to know, and I did not come because I was a coward, and because I told myself you had a good life, and I would only hurt you. And I have lived with that lie for 30 years, and the last thing I want, before this heart of mine goes, is for you to know that I know. that I have known, and that I'm sorry. I am so sorry, Harry. I am so sorry." Harriet sat on the piano bench with her back to him. She was very still. She thought about the country road. She thought about the wet grass. She thought about the day her mother had told her gently that the doctors could do no more. She thought about the 29-year-old woman she had been, learning to fold laundry by touch. She thought about the man in the hospital bed. She thought about the boy on the base in 1983. And she thought about Juno lying in the doorway between them, watching her with those steady brown eyes. She turned on the bench. She said, "Elmer." He said, "Yes, Harry." She said, "Bud is dead. He has been dead for 30 years, and he cannot say sorry. And you have said sorry for him, and I do not think that is nothing. I do not think that is nothing at all." She said, "I do not know if I can call this forgiveness. Not yet, not today. But I can call it this. I can call it this. I'm glad you came on that bus. I'm glad my dog stopped me. I'm glad you did not die in the back row. Because if you had died in the back row, I would never have known that anyone was sorry, and I would have gone to my own grave believing the world was colder than it is. And now I know it is not. And that is worth something. Elmer, that is worth a lot." Elmer wept. Harriet put her hands back on the piano. She played Autumn Sonatina from the beginning. For 3 weeks the world went quiet again. Harriet played piano. Juno slept on the rug. Elmer grew a little stronger, then a little weaker, then a little stronger. The town of Bristol did not know any of this. The town knew only that a nice old lady with a golden dog had saved a man's life on the 722, and the story ran in the paper, and then it went away, the way small stories do. But at the end of the 3rd week, a strange thing happened. Juno began to move slower. She had always been a bright, quick dog, but now she took the stairs a little more carefully. She lay down more often. She did not finish her breakfast. Harriet took her to the vet, a kind woman named Dr. Reeves, and Dr. Reeves listened to Juno's heart with a cold stethoscope for a long time. And then she looked up, and her face was gentle in a way Harriet had learned to recognize. Dr. Reeves said, "Harriet, she is 11. Retrievers do not usually go much past 12. Her heart is tired. It is not sudden. It is not painful. But it is happening. And I want you to be ready." Harriet drove home in Sadie's car, her hand buried in the fur of Juno's ruff, and she did not speak the whole way. When she got home, she sat on the porch of the small blue house, and Juno lay her big head across Harriet's lap, and Harriet stroked her ears, one after the other, over and over. She said aloud, "Oh no, oh no, oh no, my sweet girl, not yet, not yet." That night she did not sleep. The next morning she called Marion. She called Sadie. She called Wesley Pratt. She said, "Listen, Juno is tired. She does not have long. And I want to do something for her. I want to do something that thanks her. I want to have a party, a small one, this weekend, on the town green, not for me, for her. Will you help me?" They said yes. All 3 of them said yes. That Saturday afternoon, the sun came out for the first time in 10 days. The town green in Bristol was small, a square of grass with a gazebo in the middle, and old maple trees around the edge. Marion had brought a folding table. Wesley had strung a line of colored paper flags between 2 of the maples. Sadie had baked a chocolate cake with peanut butter icing because peanut butter, she had been told, was Juno's favorite. Peggy Doyle had driven down from Randolph in her old Buick. Dolores Van had come too, because Marion had called her and told her about Juno's heart, and Dolores had said, "Oh, I want to be there." And nearly 40 people from Bristol had come because word had gotten around. The librarian was there. The pharmacist was there. Wesley's whole shift of bus drivers had come, in their uniforms. Elmer was there, in a folding chair, wrapped in a blanket, with Sadie beside him. He was thinner than ever. He was smiling. Juno sat in the middle of it all, tired but calm. Her old golden head lifted to the breeze. Children came up to her one at a time and put their small hands on her broad back and told her she was a very good dog. She wagged her tail. She licked their fingers. At 3 in the afternoon, Harriet stood up and asked for quiet. The town green went still. Harriet said, "I want to say a few things, and I know I will not get through them all without crying, so please forgive me in advance." She said, "My dog, Juno, my good brave girl. 11 years ago, a school gave me a dog, and the dog gave me back a life. She has walked me to every doctor's appointment. She has walked me to every grocery store. She has walked me home in the snow when I could not tell where the sidewalk ended. And on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks ago, she stopped me from getting on a bus. And in stopping me, she saved a man's life. And in saving that man's life, she gave me back a piece of my own past that I did not know was missing. She gave me a friend I had lost in 1983. She gave me a young woman named Sadie, who has become like a daughter to me in 1 month. She gave me a young bus driver who now brings me groceries on Wednesdays and does not let me pay for the delivery. She gave me a nurse who checks my blood pressure at my kitchen table. She gave me a woman from Randolph who lost a puppy and who still, 5 years on, is looking. She gave me a mother from a yellow house at the end of a dirt road who now calls me every Sunday to talk about her boy Charlie and about the dog Charlie loved. She gave me a whole town." Harriet's voice broke. She kept going. She said, "I did not know a dog could do all of that. I thought a dog could show you the way across a street. I did not know a dog could show you the way back to the people you thought you had lost. But she did. She did. And I want to say thank you, Juno. And I want to say that whatever days are left, we are going to enjoy them. We are going to enjoy every one of them. Because you have been the best girl. You have been the best girl in the world." She sat down. Juno leaned against her leg. The town green was very quiet, and then, one by one, people began to clap. Softly at first, then louder. Elmer, in his chair, was crying. Sadie was crying. Marion was crying. Wesley was crying into the brim of his baseball cap. Then Sadie stood up. She said, "I have something else to say, and I hope Miss Coulson will not be mad at me for saying it in public." Harriet turned her head. Sadie said, "My father and I have been talking for weeks, and we have made a decision. My father is going to leave what he can, when the time comes, to the guide dog school in New Hampshire, to help train dogs like Juno, so that other people who cannot see, can have a friend like she has been. He is going to leave it in Juno's name, and in the name of a young man named Charlie Doyle, who trained her first, and he wants everyone in Bristol to know that." Elmer nodded from his chair. He raised a thin hand. The town green clapped again. Peggy Doyle put both hands over her face and cried until her shoulders shook. Dolores Van stood up. She said, "I would like to give too. I would like to give what I can. In Sonny's name, for all the dogs still lost." Wesley Pratt stood up. He said, "And I would like to say the bus company has decided, effective today, that Route 11 and Route 4 and every route in this county will train its drivers in basic first aid, because I asked them to, because I did not know how and I should have, and the training starts on Monday, and I will be first in line." The clapping was loud now, loud and sustained. Juno lifted her head at the sound and gave one soft, low woof, as if to say, "Yes, all right. Yes, all right, all of you. I hear you." The afternoon went on. There was cake. There were sandwiches. There were photographs. There was a small girl named Emily who read Juno a story out of a book she had brought from home. There was an old man named Clarence who played harmonica badly and beautifully at once. There was Elmer at his folding chair, hand in hand with Harriet, listening. The sun began to slide toward the trees. The wind picked up, and that was when it happened. 2 blocks up the road, at the corner of Elm and Maple, a small boy on a red tricycle came pedaling out of a driveway. He was 3 years old. His name was Cody. His mother, who had been distracted for a single terrible second by a text message on her phone, looked up and saw her son already in the road. She screamed his name. She began to run. She would not reach him in time. Coming down the road at the same moment was a delivery truck. The driver had not seen the boy. The boy did not know to stop. Everything in that instant was on a collision course. But Juno had been watching, in the way old dogs watch. Some part of her, the part that had smelled Elmer Hastings dying on a bus, the part that had barked at a sergeant's cancer on a base overseas, had lifted its head at the wind. She had heard the mother scream half a second before anyone else at the party had, and with all the strength that was left in her old golden body, Juno launched herself off the grass of the town green and ran, harness trailing, across the street. Harriet felt the harness snap taut and then go slack. She cried out. Marion turned. Sadie turned. Wesley Pratt turned. Juno ran the way she had run when she was 3 years old on a base in the desert, when she had run at a sergeant with a lump on his neck. She crossed the 2 blocks in a straight, fierce, golden line. She reached the small red tricycle. She hit the boy from the side, gently with her whole weight, and knocked him and the tricycle sideways into the grass of a neighbor's lawn. And the delivery truck went past in a wet whoosh of air, and it braked screaming to a stop, and the young driver leapt out white-faced and shouting, and the boy's mother reached her son a heartbeat later, and grabbed him and held him and sobbed into his hair. Juno lay in the grass. She was breathing hard. She was very tired. Her tongue was pink and long. Her old brown eyes were open, and they were bright, and they were looking, quietly, at nothing in particular. She thumped her tail once against the ground. Cody, 3 years old, sat in the grass beside her with his mother wrapped around him, and he reached out one small, chubby hand, and he laid it, very gently, on the big golden head. He said, in the calm way that only very small children can say things, "Doggy, good doggy." Juno thumped her tail again. She closed her eyes. By the time Harriet reached her, half running, Marion holding one elbow and Sadie holding the other, Juno had slipped very quietly to sleep. She was breathing. She was still breathing. But she did not open her eyes again. They carried her home. Wesley Pratt lifted her, all 68 pounds of her in his own arms, and he walked the 3 blocks to the small blue house without setting her down once, though his arms were trembling by the time he got there. He laid her on the rug by the fireplace. Dr. Reeves came within the hour. Dr. Reeves listened to Juno's heart. Dr. Reeves lifted her head and looked at Harriet, and Harriet already knew. Dr. Reeves said she is not in pain. She is very tired. She is going to sleep now, Harriet. You can be with her. You can lie down beside her. You can hold her, and when she is ready, she will go. Harriet lay down on the rug beside her old dog. She put her forehead against Juno's forehead. She said, "Oh, my brave girl. Oh, my brave, brave girl. You did it again. You did it again, sweetheart. You saved another one. And now you can rest. Now you can rest. I love you. I love you, I love you, I love you. Go find Charlie. Charlie is waiting." Juno breathed in. Juno breathed out. Juno breathed in again, more slowly, and then, very peacefully, on the rug of a small blue house near the town green in Bristol, Vermont, with her person's hand on her heart, Juno stopped breathing. The house was quiet for a very long time. Then Marion, sitting on the sofa with tears sliding down her face, said, "Look, look, Harriet." Harriet said, "Honey, I cannot look," Marion said on her collar. "Sadie put it on her this morning before we went to the green. She was going to tell you tonight. Reach up and feel." Harriet reached out with a shaking hand. She felt Juno's collar. And there, hooked to it, was a small silver tag, warm from Juno's body. Harriet's fingers traced the words engraved on it. She could not read the letters, but Sadie, from the sofa, in a voice choked with tears, read them out loud. She said, it says, "She saw what no one else could." Harriet pressed her forehead to Juno's fur one more time. She did not speak. She did not need to. Outside, the sun was setting over the town of Bristol. The wind was in the maple trees. Somewhere down the street, a mother was tucking her small son into bed and telling him, again, that the doggy had saved him. Somewhere in a rental apartment on Maple Street, an old man was sitting up in a chair, thinking about a country road in 1988, and a summer at a county fair in 1983, and a woman he had finally, in the last hour of his best life, been brave enough to love out loud. Somewhere in a yellow house, at the end of a dirt road, an old mother was holding a photograph of her boy and whispering, "Welcome home, my Charlie. Welcome home to your girl." And on the rug of a small blue house, an old woman with silver hair sat holding the heavy head of a golden dog. And she was not crying yet, because there is a stillness that comes before the tears. A stillness in which the whole life of the thing you have lost sits down beside you and looks at you and thanks you. In the weeks that followed, Bristol was a different town. Nobody said it, but everyone knew it. Wesley Pratt started the first aid class. 28 bus drivers took it, then 30, then all 41 drivers in the county. 2 months later, a bus driver on Route 6 recognized a stroke in a passenger and pulled over and called for help. And the passenger, an 80-year-old woman named Marlene, walked out of the hospital 11 days later on her own 2 feet. Wesley cried at the news like a child. He wrote Harriet a letter. It began, "Dear Miss Colson, I need to tell you what happened today because of a dog." Elmer Hastings lived another 19 months. He and Harriet were married in a small ceremony at the town green in the following spring, under the same maple trees where the party for Juno had been. Sadie was maid of honor. Peggy Doyle drove down from Randolph again. Dolores Van came, and she brought a puppy, a small, floppy-eared golden puppy from a litter she was fostering, and she said, "Harriet, when you are ready. Only when you are ready. This one has your name on her, I think." Harriet did not take the puppy that day, but 6 months later, when Elmer had passed peacefully in his sleep and the small blue house was too quiet, Harriet called Dolores, and Dolores drove down with the puppy in a crate on her back seat, and Harriet named her Autumn after the sonatina she had played every afternoon for a dying man for 1 whole beautiful year. The scholarship fund in Juno and Charlie's names is still going. Last year, it trained 4 dogs. This year, it will train 6. A young man named Marcus in Boston, who lost his sight to diabetes at the age of 32, now walks to work every day with a dog named Beckett. And Beckett was trained on money from a garage mechanic in Middlebury, who once, on a Tuesday morning in November, had a heart attack on the 722 bus. Marcus does not know that story, but he knows he has the best dog in the world. Some things do not need to be known to be true. Harriet is 71 now. She still lives in the small blue house near the town green. Autumn is 9 years old, still with the soft floppy ears, still with the steady brown eyes. Autumn is not Juno, and Autumn does not need to be Juno. Autumn is Autumn. Autumn walks Harriet to the community center every Tuesday morning, and Harriet plays piano for the seniors' choir. And afterward they walk home the long way, past Elmer's grave in the little cemetery on the hill. And Harriet talks to Elmer for a while, and Autumn lies down in the grass and waits. Sometimes, on the way home, they stop at the corner of Elm Street where the bus pulls in, and Harriet stands there with her hand on Autumn's harness, and she remembers a growl, a low, terrible growl, the growl that would not let her step forward, the growl that changed everything, and every time she thinks the same thing. Real love does not always speak. Sometimes it plants its paws on the sidewalk. Sometimes it refuses to move. Sometimes it stands quiet and stubborn between you and the door you are about to walk through until the whole world catches up. If this story moved you, please leave a heart in the comments. Tell us the name of a dog who has loved you, or a person, or a moment when someone quiet in your life was braver for you than you knew. And go ahead and subscribe to the channel so we can keep telling stories like this one together.